find yourself in another part of the world, and you may find yourself behind the wheel of a large automobile, and you may find yourself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife, and you may ask yourself, well, how did I get here? Letting the days go by, let the water hold me down. Letting the days go by, water flowing underground into the blue again. After the money's gone, once in a lifetime, water flowing underground. And you may ask yourself,
welcome to the 2-month review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter and 3%, in which we take one giant book, such as The Dreamed Part, break it down bit by bit, section by section, analyze it, talk about it, discuss it, have jokes, have a good time. I'm Chad Post from Open Letter Books, and joined as always by Brian Wood and Will Vanderhyden, who's our guest this week. And all three of us have decided to take up a new career in robbing banks. No?
Let's take these
for that, man. It's a good time to rob banks. So. How are you guys doing?
Doing all right.
I'm okay.
Surviving?
I'm all right. Yeah. Well,
surviving is the new great.
Right.
But let's start with talking to you, Will. So you, as translator of this book, obviously are an important guest to have on here. But before you get into talking about the book itself, where are you and what's your story for your quarantine times?
I'm in Tampa, Florida, quarantining with my in-laws because
Are you doing the TB12 method? You're doing like all your electrolytes and your special I bet that water probably fights COVID as well.
Yeah.
If you do the Tom Brady method down there in Tampa. Sorry, I couldn't.
Probably. I'm not totally familiar with that, but no, Luisa and I, my partner, we had to leave. We were in Mexico. She's a doctoral candidate in anthropology at Emory University and doing her field work in northern Guatemala, and we were living in San Cristobal de las Casas in southern Mexico, and Guatemala closed its border with Mexico, so she was no longer going to be able to go back and forth between the two. And then a few days after that happened, Emory told her that if she didn't come back, they would no longer be able to guarantee her funding or her health insurance.
I see.
You're gonna die broke if you do not.
We were in. So it's kind of we were preparing to like quarantine there and just stay and just like we have a really nice house there that we're still renting, and we're gonna be able to be pretty isolated, but it sort of became untenable also because they were talking about closing the border with the US, and we didn't want to like be in a situation where we couldn't like get back to be with our families if that if somebody got sick or if whatever, or who knows what's gonna happen. So we came back and Tampa was the easiest place for us to go because Luisa's parents live here and our house in Atlanta is being subletted right now, so we couldn't just go back there.
And neither of those choices seem great at this moment in time.
No, I mean we could have gone to stay with my family, but it would have been going to the Midwest and they don't have as much space as Luisa's family does. So.
Oh yeah. But there's probably more people with guns around there.
Here, in fact, Luisa's dad is a collector.
Oh shit! I came up with a brilliant business proposition for COVID times is Grubhub for ammo and weaponry.
Yeah,
we call it Amazon. I didn't come up with that, and that made me want to punch myself. But you could totally start like just start delivering weaponry and guns to like the people that need it, that want it, so they can go protest.
Yeah, you'd have to set it up for rural communities, which might be a little tricky, but that's where your big sales would be.
That's true. Yeah, you just gotta do it in bulk. It's all about doing it in bulk.
No, there's something like 150 guns in this house right now. So.
Holy shit! Jesus Christ! So you guys are like in a compound, and do you have your bug out bag?
he's like a collector. He's got all these fancy like he polishes them, and it's what it is. But I'll just leave it there.
Oh my God! So what are you working on now?
I'm working on the next one, the remembered part. It's nice to have a big, long project to be heavy into during this time. So.
Are you finding it easier to translate, very hard to translate during this period, or are you unaffected?
It's day to day. Like some days I just like can shut everything out and focus, but most days it's a struggle. I think like for everybody right now.
Yeah.
Where it's like if you allow yourself to be too inundated with the news and like the dread that all of that entails, it's kind of hard to focus on anything.
There's an underlying sense of stress and anxiety. This isn't for this podcast, but talking to my students every day is very much that too. I spent 1 hour today just making them laugh or making myself laugh by making fun of Bookfinity and talking about the publisher's weekly spam or satire account that came into existence.
I saw that. Publishers Weekly.
Week, like WEAK. Yeah, the number of people who have asked me if I'm behind that is a little alarming.
I was wondering. It does sort of have a Chad Post kind of tone to it.
Mark Benelli's like, it sounds just like you. And I was like, no way, man. Like, I am not that witty. Like, I'm not that funny. Like,
you're not.
Yeah. But I did DM them and they wrote back instantly and were like, we love your podcast. Keep up the good work. And had a bunch of heart emojis. But I don't know anyone who uses that particular heart emoji. So I still don't know who it is.
I bet you'll figure it out. I don't think Brian or I will figure it out.
No, it's a bookseller and someone at an indie publisher. So
neither one of those things matter. So
yeah.
why would I follow that?
I don't know what matters anymore. So how is the remembered part?
It's awesome.
Yeah. You read the whole thing before you translate, or do you?
Yeah.
Are you one of the people that
With his, I do because I like reading them because they're so fun to read. And if I find a section that I really like, just feel like this is awesome, and I want to try to write it in English right now, then I'll do that. But this I read right away when I don't even know, maybe even before it came out in Spanish. I think I had the PDF.
Yeah, I remember he sent it to us when their laid out version, and I scanned through for Rochester and found the section about going to Billy Pilgrim's grave. Yeah,
there's some Rochester in there. It's bigger. It's longer than the other two.
Cool. No, that's good. I love it.
I think the other two are like 220,000 words, and this one is, I think it's over 300,000, and will be in the translation too. With the translation, I'm at about 110,000 words. Almost done with the first of three sections. It's also three parts.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I don't want to. You shouldn't give away any spoilers about
it. I don't want to. It's got. I mean, a big part of the plot of the triptych, as he calls it, triptych novel as opposed to trilogy, is resolved in the dreamed part at the end. There's a chunk of what's been behind everything. Is resolved.
What he told me about before, which I've been sort of sitting on. I'm not sure, but he told me something about it way back.
Yeah. There's more karmas. There's more.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not going to go into it because it's great. It's great, and there is a plot like you guys have been saying on this podcast this season. The plot is like hinted at and sprinkled in these different ways at different times, but it's a really sad backstory, which part of which is still not resolved at the end of the dream part, which is Penelope's missing son.
Correct.
Whether he's dead or not.
Yeah.
I think I might be saying too much already.
I don't know. We talked about that last week.
It's mentioned in this section.
Yeah, it's mentioned in this section as well. But it's unclear as to where he is or what happened. Like that. I don't think in this that it ever even talks about like what happened when she went off with him. right?
No, yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't in the dream part at all.
That's what I thought. Okay, cool. Are there other things that you're working on translating right now, or is this you just working on dream part?
Yeah, nothing under contract, but I have other projects. I got another Lab A book I want to throw your way one of these days.
Excellent. So you also said that you were on not Slate. Yeah, Slate.
Yeah. Well, one of their sort of blog, the Future Tense blog, which is part of Slate, with a Juan Villoro story. Yeah.
Right.
Which that was cool. That was cool. I met him in Guadalajara actually. He was there, and Freisan introduced me to him, and then he's never. Actually, I shouldn't say what I was going to say publicly. He was looking for a different translator for a new piece, and they got me, and because he met me and is good friends with Rodrigo, he asked for my contact and then asked me to do it, and it turned out to be really good. And Slate pays really well, so that was nice.
Nice. Get that big paycheck now before it doesn't matter.
Well, I haven't gotten the paycheck yet, but
get it wired. There's rapidly going to be chaos soon, guys.
Yeah, I know.
We did. I wish I could share this without it being super embarrassing, but we did I did our monthly sales, and I did a chart of the monthly sales for this fiscal year, and they're like, good, great. It's like our best year ever even through March. It's good, great. And then it gets to April and just goes straight down. This line is like, we've sold like 1/5 of the number of books that we usually do in a month through this point. So yeah, it's good. Business is great. People buying lots of # books are essential.
I'm curious, this is off subject slightly, but Will, when did you first come across Rodrigo's work? I mean, now that you're finishing up this triptych of his, how did you first come across one of his manuscripts?
My brother gave me the English translation of Kensington Gardens.
Okay.
And I think it was a year or two before I came to Rochester for that master's program. Before I started translating, really. And or right around the time I was starting to.
Okay.
And yeah, and I was a fan of Natasha Wimmer as a translator at that point, having read her Bologna translations.
Yeah.
Still a fan of Natasha Wimmer. She's one of those translators, any project she picks up, I'll at least give it a shot to read the English. Sure. And even if I haven't read the Spanish or don't know the author.
Yeah. And there's no way that I'm going to recall this, and Brian, you might, but maybe not. But the section it's funny because in my class, thanks to you, Brian, your recommendation, I used one year your part of Navidad and Matanza and the part that Natasha Wimmer did for Granta to compare the two translations and have the students do that comparison. And I remember you, Brian, had some very specific. There's a specific word choice or phrasing that you liked one. I think you liked Will's better than hers for one very specific thing, but you told me about it when we were here doing Rock in Your Mouth podcast. So I don't know.
Okay.
Shows how good your taste is, Brian.
Yeah. Clearly, I've got such fantastic tastemaker. And so then, did you seek out untranslated works after reading Kensington Gardens for the Maltz program?
Yeah. Yep, I bought a bunch of his books after reading that because I saw because at first I looked for him in English because at that point I was just starting to try translating. And then I got a bunch of the Spanish ones and read a few and then started translating The Bottom of the Sky. I had translated a big section of that when I came to Rochester already, and then that was the first. Well, it was. I guess I sort of pitched it to you guys. I don't know. It was you had it for a long time before.
If you remember, you gave it to us, and I was like, "This is great, but he's too big. We won't be able to get right. from Carmen Balcells, and because FSU had published that not that long before. I mean, it was a few years, but it was still within a semi-reasonable amount of time. And there had been the articles.
Yeah, it came out in 2007 or something like that. So
yeah, and so we were
yeah.
So it's I don't think that we're going to be able to get it. But then when we finally were able to reach out and do it, everything obviously all worked out. But at that first point, it wasn't so much that we were waiting on it so much as I remember having a conversation with you of I can't imagine they're going to want to sell this to us.
Yeah, I remember that too, because I remember it was a couple years after I'd finished the program, and you reached out to me because your class had chosen it as like one of their favorite, or like your publishing class where they decide which manuscript that Open Letter should take on, or hypothetically.
Yeah.
And they had picked it as one of their favorites. So I remember that, and then like from that point on, I think you must have contacted him, or no, Valerie Miles.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's like a good little publishing story in a way.
Yeah.
Publishing stories are good, or more entertaining even. But anyways, yeah. So yeah, now we have the 3 that are out, the one that you're working on, and then Mantra will come out after that.
Yeah.
Do you remember, we were talking about this last week, the karmas are in Mantra, right?
The mantras are in Mantra.
Mantras are in Mantra.
Which the karmas are the writer's version of mantras.
Got it.
Like the writer is not Freisan, but he's his alter ego. Even though Freisan also exists in the writer's world, as the real Freisan also exists, makes his cameos here and there. But yeah, it's similar. The family's it's the same in some ways, and also just like within the same fictional universe to a certain extent.
That's super cool.
If I didn't botch that totally and make it less clear. But. No,
that makes total sense. That's what I was confused about, but I remember that there was a connection. I just couldn't quite pull it up. And Veronica Esposito's website, the conversational reading quarterly conversation, doesn't exist anymore. So like the article in which that I used to always refer to that explained all of Mantra is no longer available.
Right. I remember seeing that article. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. It was wonderful. It was like one of the reasons that got me really excited about everything too.
Mantra's really cool and written in this, years ago now. So it's a different, the voice is similar, but I don't know. Freisan's sort of narrative sensibility has definitely evolved, and like he was younger then, and I don't know. I wouldn't want to comment on his headspace or anything, but it's like it's a little bit different, a different kind of energy in some ways. Maybe not quite as disillusioned as what you get in the triptych.
Yeah.
Not that Freisan is disillusioned, but his narrator is.
Right.
Yeah.
Age is a bitch, man. Like everything becomes disillusioned. So anyway, this episode, we're starting part 3 of the dreamed part, which is titled Tonight, Manual of Last Rites for Waking Dreamers. And we specifically are going up to page 307 if you're following along at home. And the first bit of this again, like the other 2 sections, opens in like a miasma of like, and that seems to be something that with at Bottom of the Sky does as well, where things open in this like things are happening, but you're not really clear as to like where you are or who's speaking or what, and it just has like almost riffs on like a theme. I remember writing about this when we started the Invented Part. There's sort of a similarity in between that and Bottom of the Sky and Kensington Gardens as to like how the openings come out instead of being like this immediate like placing you like I would think like the Iowa workshop fiction, whatever, where you're like, give the character, give a place, give a sense. Everything should be concrete at the beginning. His are like amorphous and diffuse, and you slowly figure out. Like literally, the first line of the section is, "At night, the past blows more powerfully."
Yeah,
which is another.
I think but it does, and he always does in all of these sections that might seem confusing. I think to people who haven't read his work, or disorienting. It does set out the theme very quickly. And like this section open, I didn't read it because you surprised me today. I forgot that it was today that we were doing this. I thought it was tomorrow. And so I had reread
tomorrow's the draft. We got to do the draft tomorrow. We got to talk about football by the end of this, but yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Why our draft?
Yeah, I'm hoping I can stay in Tampa until the NFL season comes around, because they're going to have Gronk and Brady here, which is, that's going to be exciting.
Yeah. How cool.
No, but yeah, so I didn't read the pages, but I skimmed again, and it opens with sort of very characteristic Frasanian sort of list making with a bunch of extended metaphors about the past, what the past is, these metaphors for the past, and then moves into a list of another form of his typical list making, which is the Biji notebook. Well, that's the framing for this other list making stuff. And I think that's sort of carries us through all of today's structurally in terms of what we we're supposed to read.
Yep, exactly. And I always think of these openings too, like almost as overtures. Like they sort of hit a bunch of things, set up like the tone of the section and what's going to happen, and then as the rest of it plays out, you sort of fill in those gaps. But there's like the touchstones of the past or whatever. That's why I named this one. This episode got named after the one line in the middle that I really, really love. That is, where is it?
The past is a broken toy that everyone fixes in their own way, or something like that.
Yep, exactly. The past is a broken toy that everyone fixes in his own way. So, yeah, I love it. But that's the beginning is all this past stuff, and there's like a quick reference to sleepless nights on the beginning. Oh, this is a question that we had for you from last week. Was that there's a lot of like, even before it sets up like the insomnia and all that, there's like the words that are planted in there of like sleepless, of like that relate to the situation of the narrator. And last week's one with Penelope is that, or maybe it was a few weeks ago, but with Penelope's section, all the words that relate to Wuthering Heights that are sprinkled into the beginning parts, like that seems so intentional. And I was wondering, like, as a translator, I'd like those words are obviously there in the Spanish, but they're also very specific to like the English rendering of Wuthering Heights. So I was wondering how many of those references you have to pick up on and pay attention to as you're going through the translation.
Yeah. Gosh, I'm sure I miss some references.
I mean, you can't not, to be honest.
No, I'm sure I do, but he's good. I mean, he doesn't always put quotes around quotations or whatever, but usually you can pick those up. But like those, I think I know what you mean in terms of the sprinkling in sort of concepts that refer back to whatever, to Wuthering Heights or whatever, like book is sort of behind the subject matter.
Yeah.
I was like, I guess because I'm so familiar with the books he's referencing a lot of the time, I think I pick up on most of the time. But there are things that he seems to have read everything.
Yeah.
Like,
so annoying.
No, it is. And he also reads like a lot of stuff in English that I haven't. I mean, clearly a lot of stuff in English that many people haven't read all of. So yeah, no, I ask him questions too. If I think something is a reference to something, and I can't figure out what it is, I've figured out a sort of way to find quotes, because oftentimes like there's a translation in the original of something from English, and I don't know, and it doesn't say what book it's from. Like say it's a Fitzgerald quote or a Proust quote or whatever. And I have to figure out a way to locate it I don't want to ask him every single time.
Yeah.
So I'll back translate a section of it. If I don't know what book it's from or whatever, I'll back translate a section of it. And then I have these ways of using Google to figure out where it's from, sort of refining the translation, figuring out what exact words that he's translated in which way. And then, it's not scientific, but I've had to do that.
That is wild. I
can't even imagine trying to do a Fresson book before the internet.
Jesus Christ. That would be absolutely insane. The one, while we're talking about the translation, the part that I really wanted you to come on here for to ask you a question about is on 284, 285, the joke.
Is that the joke?
Yeah.
Is that the past, present, future? Yeah, I circled that as well.
Yeah. Okay. So for anyone who hasn't read that, that's listening, so he remembers this joke. The past and the present and the future walk into a bar, and he remembers that the punchline didn't translate. It was tense. So the joke is the past, the present, and the future walk into a bar. It was tense, like TNSE, which plays off of the past tense or the tenses and being tense. So it said in Spanish, where verbal tense translates as tiempo, meaning time, also meaning time, not tenso, even though tenso does mean tense in the other sense of the English word, the joke loses the double meaning, is no longer a joke, bad or otherwise. But he also remembers that when it came to retelling it in his own language, for once that joke hadn't dissolved into oblivion, it was as if he'd wrapped that joke around a finger or tied it around his head. He'd figured out how to betray it with a trio of ridiculous punchline options to be chosen from depending on the mood and situation. To wit, and then it has in Spanish, which I will not read it. I don't want to read Spanish out loud. I have a real complex about it. So I'll let you do that, Will, if you want to.
El pasado y el presente y el futuro entran en un bar. And A, no tienen tiempo que perder. They had no time / tense to lose. Or B, tenían todo el tiempo del mundo. They had all the time / tenses in the world. Or, ¿qué hora es? Preguntaron todos al mismo tiempo, respondiéndose a la misma hora, pero en distintos días. What time is it? They all asked at the same time, answering with the same hour, but on different days. All right.
All which are pretty funny and interesting. So what was this in the original?
It just didn't have those in. Well, his retelling of the English joke, which is the part that I read there, it just had the Spanish, and then I just put those interpolated sort of English translations of the punchlines.
Okay.
But there was some creative work I did, and I can't remember exactly what I did because I don't have the original in front of me. But back in the part that you read, where he mentions the punchline and how it doesn't translate in Spanish, where verbal tense translates as tiempo, also meaning time, not tenso, even though tenso does mean tense in the other sense of the English word. Like the whole bit where the joke loses the double meaning is no longer a joke, bad or otherwise. Like some of that in there wasn't the same in Spanish. I had to do some writing there.
That's what I was wondering about. That's the section. I figured that the Spanish part was like that, but that to get to that to work, you had to explain something else. And it seemed like some of that had to be invented by you. Otherwise, it would be in the original. It would have been like really confusing.
Yeah, and the introduction for this whole joke, how this joke is introduced in the narrative here, is because he's having this encounter with a writer in a bar.
David Foster Wallace.
Yeah, and it's supposed to be David Foster Wallace. So that's cool.
Yeah. I wonder if they ever.
They did. Yeah, they met. They met multiple times.
Okay.
I can let Freyson tell you those stories though. But
come on.
Yeah, but I don't know if this particular one in the bar is based on an actual encounter or not.
He's met
the lit bro holy trinity. We've got Nabokov and Vonnegut and then David Foster Wallace. Oh my gosh, all the dudes just creamed their pants.
So
lit bros.
Funny story. The first time that I was on Illinois State's campus, was it the first time? It was one of the first times I was on Illinois State's campus when I was going to go work for Delphi. I went to Martin Riker's thesis defense for the book Samuel Johnson's Endless Return. I think that's what it's called. That came out from Coffee House last year, and it was David Foster Wallace was his advisor. So it was David Foster Wallace talking about that book that now exists as a book in the world. Like years have gone by between those two, but it was like a weird thing to think about now and see that come out.
I think it's Eternal Return.
Eternal Return. That's it. Yeah.
I think you don't want to lose the Nietzsche reference.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Do you know how fucked my memory is nowadays? Like, I'm barely hanging on.
Eternal Return sounds like a terrible jazz fusion band.
What's that?
Like led by Eternal Return sounds like a terrible jazz fusion band from the 80s where they have like a keytar and like Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock or something. For one night only, Eternal Return. Just get up with jerry curls and play like a jazz exploration for 40 minutes. I'm just like random electronic noise, just like turn this off.
Oh my God. So with this part, so this beginning part opens with him like thinking through, talking about the past, nothing is to be done. Though the idea that like the past will always get bigger as the future gets smaller because you're more of your life is in the past is really depressing. Thank you, Rodrigo, for that existential crisis last night. I appreciate it. Things are, going well here. I really like the part where he makes fun of poetry a little bit. I mean, not really. It's kind of like an ultimate compliment to poets. But the part where it's like poetry was never his thing. Poetry always frightened him in the same way. Everything with Penelope more than ever. That nuns or riding horses frightened him. He never understood how someone could wed themselves to a god or entrust their body to that of an animal or arrive at the certainty that a poem was bad or good or perfect. Which is sort of my experience with poetry. I have no frame of judgment, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that bit is funny, but and it's not. It could seem like a dig at poetry, but I don't really think it is. I think it's just
no,
because he definitely quotes. I mean, some of his epigraphs are from poems sometimes, and I think he probably has read a fair amount of poetry and is good friends with poets like Bolaño was a poet and other people, but yeah, not his thing, I don't think.
Yeah, and I mean, it comes up right after that, where it's like poets sometimes washed up, sometimes fucked up, always clever. Word for him, writers wired in a different way. Writers who are able, in just a few lines, to illuminate the mystery of how your parents had screwed you up, or the irrational reasons behind the suicides of your wives or daughters, or the way in which your kids would end up screwing you up, and that leads them to fantasize about the idea of reinventing himself as a poet. But obviously, like the writer cannot possibly write poetry. I don't think.
Yeah.
I think the writer is incapable of not making things wrong.
Right. Yeah. There's another layer to that is like how in Argentina and Chile, the southern cone, like it's like everyone's a poet. Like it's culturally like it's a cool thing to be a poet, And so there's a lot of shitty poetry, as there is here, but. And so I think, like any writing, there's going to be lots of shitty writing. And people are really good at it.
That line was brought to you by National Poetry Month, which is going on April.
I've been reading, and I know you're not like going to be a huge. Actually, it was a recommendation of Rodrigo's, and it's not one of your favorite writers anymore, Ted, but Alejandro Zambra's new book, which is called Poeta Chileno, and it's not out in English, but it's really, really fucking good. And I mean, he's not. I haven't loved all of his books.
Me neither. But I think he's really talented.
He's super talented, and this book is it's my favorite. It's longer than his other ones, and it's really funny, and cool. It's all about this idea of. I know we're getting off subject here,
okay.
But it's all about this idea in Latin America of how everyone's a poet, and it's about kind of a guy who starts out as a real shitty poet, and I mean, I don't know. I won't break down the plot of it, but he's really funny. And
I'm sure. I wonder who will end up publishing it. Probably Riverhead.
Yeah, I'm just sad that all his translator is so good, and she's
McDowell's gonna do it.
I'm sure she will. Yeah, I'm sure because he's become so big in the U.S. now. He's broken out here, I suppose. With his reviews in the New Yorker and getting his stories published in the New Yorker and shit. And Open Letter played a big part in introducing.
The first translation Megan McDowell ever published was Private Lives of Trees.
Yeah. She's got all the big Southern Cone writers in her.
Super random. My friend in high school, I think he designed the last 2 or 3 book covers of Zambra's books.
Oh, funny.
Yeah, like really, really crazy random.
It's wild.
In the English editions.
Yeah, the English editions. He ended up being the art director for McSweeney's, I think, or something.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty badass.
Yeah. It's like really strange. But yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually kind of like the narrator kind of makes fun of his own poetry abilities on 273. So there is kind of like that joke is sort of there in a way where, X, the writer that he loves so much and like the closest he'd ever come to a homosexual or bisexual experience, right. Or whatever it was, right? But X was a poet, quite a good one according to people who understood such things. He had a notebook dedicated to the attempt, as vain as it was in vain, of describing a dream where, and he goes on and on. But this idea of, I think everybody that's a writer has somewhere some notebook of just terrible poetry. Working out all of our unrequited loves. And
I think a lot of good poets have that notebook of
Have
really
that as well.
terrible
Okay.
poetry too.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
Writing's hard.
One part I love about, there's a bunch of parts I love in this section that are just like one-off little bits, but on 269's too, where the bit about Peanuts is like the darkest, craziest comic strip ever. When you read it now, it's like, it seems like wildly inappropriate for like kids. It's so dark. Isn't the beginning, like the very first Peanut strip is something like Charlie Brown walks by like two of the kids sitting on a bench, and they're like, who is that? And they're like, Charlie Brown, he's a loser. And like he walks off in the distance, and it's like, this is like, well, that's not really funny. But this one's great. So panel 1, Linus asks Charlie Brown, you know that there's one day in your life that will always be the best compared to all the other days? And Charlie Brown, panel 2, answers asking, of course, why do you ask? So that Linus, panel 3, answers, well, and what happens if that day has already passed? It's like, God damn it. Why? Yeah. Peanuts is fuck Peanuts.
I tried to find that actual comic strip, and I'm not sure it exists. So he's writing Peanuts now too.
But it feels like it. If you could find any of those, it feels like it could be. It fits in.
Yeah. Oh no, it's perfect. It totally could be. It's got that very existentialist humor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So wild. So they started with all that. Then we get this great section that is really appropriate for today about the idea of Nabokov being a relationship with an FBI agent who's supposed to like spy on Nabokov, and that's his birthday today.
Yeah, Nabokov's birthday.
He's born on April 22nd. So nice coincidence. I mean, if we were doing this on any section of one of Rodrigo's books on Nabokov's birthday, it would be appropriate. So it's not like that part's a coincidence. It's just a coincidence that his birthday landed on a Wednesday.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love this part. It's one of my favorite bits in the dreams part. Actually, this sort of short story about FBI agent Johnny Dancer.
Johnny Dancer.
Almost as good as Johnny Diamond. Great names.
There's a bunch more of this, and just to hint at the remembered part again of this sort of. I mean, there's a bunch more about Nabokov and his obsession with Nabokov and trying to read Ada or Ardor.
I still haven't read.
Which the narrator finally reads in very dramatic fashion in the remembered part. There's a hint. I'll give a plot point.
Shit, I'm gonna have to actually read that. I thought maybe that would be a good quarantine book.
Yeah, I've not read the whole thing, but I want to read it. I think it's very interesting, and like it's very like probably the hardest Nabokov book to place in the rest of his work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nabokov is always super fun.
Yeah, so that part's fun too because it references back. So in this little story, Johnny Dancer is supposed to report back on Nabokov and on Vera, his wife, as they travel around the country. But he goes and follows them, and they aren't like communist Reds at all. They're like the complete opposite. So it's all pretty pointless. And then he ends up in the hotel that they lived in Montreux in Switzerland as like a was he not a bellman but like whatever,
a nurse,
and he has to bring up a TV so that they can watch the moon landing, because in the book I was like, they're gonna ask me, because they asked me all about all this shit because I'm a writer. And that goes back to that earlier part where Penelope's on the panel with the other writer who's like, yeah, we don't really, it's at a time when you don't just write anymore, where you have to talk about things because you're a writer, you have to answer about everything that happens and not.
They want your opinion on everything.
Yeah.
Which is a big. Gets to a sort of standard frisson frustration with, like, writers have to spend much less time writing and much more time like being a writer. Now it's much more the obsession with like.
Where do you get your ideas from? That was really big in the first book, so it was kind of cool to see it, the echo of it in this one, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you think this part was sprinkled in like this to kind of counterbalance Penelope with the Brontes? and you get some of the stories behind because in the previous section we read a lot about Wuthering Heights and the Brontes, and this one you get a lot of the Nabokov, which I thought was kind of, and it being the narrator's kind of one of his big influences.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fair to say. It's kind of something. It's always something he's doing. These sort of almost literary essays, very creative ones, on some of the writers he's obsessed with in approaching in different ways. But like with Tender as the Night, specifically that one section in the invented part that is like breaking down the backstory of when everybody died, like, and Hemingway and Fitzgerald, the writers, and then like also the work itself. And that's, I feel like, what he's doing in the second section with Wuthering Heights and Emily Bronte and the Bronte sisters. But I love that second section. I thought you guys broke it down interesting in a really good way, and it was really interesting to listen to. But I really love the way it opened. I love that part that seems so confusing if you when you're first approaching it. But then with Stella d'Or and the Tulpa sisters and like the Tulpa sisters' brother, I can't remember what his name is.
Patrick, but it's something like that.
Yeah, but like how that is sets up the sort of looking at the celebrity, the figures that the Brontes have become sort of literary celebrities, and I don't know, it's so smart and so well crafted, that part.
Yeah, no shit. I just typed this in and found that there's a Great Gatsby.
Nice.
That's there. I did this backwards, like he does in here over and over again. But on that same page, or at the end of the Nabokov section, it says that he likes it always refers to liking really bad jokes, and those are the ones that you remember. You never remember the good ones. And the one that's like the kind of thing that resembled the sound one makes when one's talking to oneself or talking to a cat. The cat he never had, but if he had it, he would have called bad joke, the kind of joke that cracks him up the most, the Great Gatsby. Fitzgerald.
Yeah.
Oh yes. So the bad jokes. Then we get a bit about where he is for a second in terms of the intruder. So on 287, talks about that there are people that are nearby that are loud and drunk and texting all the time and taking selfies and disrupting him. Although he's not, he's like pure insomniac, right?
Yeah, no, that is true. Hadn't gotten to that when I was skimming. I hadn't remembered that this part, it sort of introduces, like, for the first time, where he's writing this story from,
right?
Which becomes it gets further developed in this part, and it's hilarious and awesome.
Yeah, it really is. That's
the photograph.
What's that?
Yeah, it ends with the photograph and the death of the people in the photograph and the hauntings that I assume will take place.
Which name?
Nicolisto.
Oh.
As we get towards the end of it, right? After the intruders and the
that gets more to the sort of. Well, okay, so that's one place where a lot of this story unfolds, that in this third part. But also, what I think Chad is referring to is where the narrator is while he's telling all of it, with the intruders next door, and he's in his house, and that also becomes sort of central to the sort of unfolding present while he's remembering the night where where the sort of central plot is unfolding. In his memory, which involves more of the boy, the boy he competed with in the writing competitions when he was in school.
It's always good to have an arch nemesis.
Yeah. He's the early version of IKEA.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. This one is set up a little bit like the other two too, where like you don't get the location until later, and like it's that reversed cause and effect thing kind of thing, where you don't set that up until
it's like it's like that in all three sections, right? Because you don't find out that Penelope is in her asylum nunnery place until a little ways on in the second section, and then the first section you don't really ever get grounded because actually that's being written from the same place that the third section is being written.
Yeah, exactly. But it does. But the plot in the first section gets unveiled. Same thing with Penelope. If like the main part of like why is she there? That part, that actual detail isn't until the very end.
Yeah.
And like, what is the dream? The experiment they did that screwed up all the dreams. Is there? Did I talk on this podcast about the new Agualusa book? Brian, does this remind you? I'm on line like 24/7 now. I have no idea who I've told what to.
I don't remember.
I don't listen. I don't listen to anything you're saying as it's happening, really. So
there's this new book called Society of Reluctant Dreamers by Jose Agualusa. He has a second name, but I don't remember what it is. And it's a short book came out from Archipelago like last month, like on March 10th, best day for a book to come out. And it's about this guy. One of the main threads is that there's a researcher in Brazil who's trying to make a machine that will allow you to film people's dreams. And they're like going to experiment with it, and you have to lay down and dream and then wake up and you tell them what you're dreaming, and they map out like the visuals that they have onto that dream. And it's like, this is so weird. Like it connects to the dream part like in so many ways. Yeah. And it's like that first part, especially of like the idea of like trying to be able to capture and film a dream, which in here goes horribly awry in like the best possible way. And in the other book, it's like completely like they are able to do it, and they just like make movies.
We did mention that I think on the podcast with Rachel.
Okay, that's what it was. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I thought there was someone, but I didn't remember telling you, Brian. So that's why.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, I won't recount that again.
You just
I don't know what days are anymore, man. What anything is anymore. So the last major big plot point part is what you were referencing too, of when he thinks back to when he was a boy and the kid gets electrocuted.
Yeah.
Which isn't funny.
But do you think he gets to that, like, is the way the plot progresses, does he get to that because he's in Penelope's house and Penelope's son, and then starts thinking of loss in that way, do you think? Do you think that's the kind of like the weird, like, river that we're navigating to get to that point?
Yeah, because there is like... well, you have a comment on that, Will?
No, I just that sounds, that makes sense. I hadn't thought about it like that. But.
Same here. I had marked a bit where it talks about the two in conjunction with each other, but maybe I'm making that up. I'm not finding it right now. But it was like referencing that.
There's some interesting wordplay. Like this is like 286. This is Penelope, very bottom line. This is Penelope's beautiful house where he may wonder how did he get there without needing the answer, because he knows perfectly how he got there. He came with nothing and no one, like an orphan. So like using the word orphan there, and then thinking about like is Penelope's kid orphaned or not, or dead? Like like there's that part of it, and then
and that what you're referring to there, that first line where he may wonder how did he get there without needing an answer because he knows perfectly well how he got there. The whole how did I get here is from the Talking Heads song. Which one?
It's from the album Speaking in Tongues, I believe.
Yeah, it's probably from what song? Once in a Lifetime, maybe.
That's what I
Which you see up at the top of 286. There's a long quote from that, and actually the book ends with lyrics from that song as well. It's one of the primary reference songs, that and Dream Operator and Bob Dylan's series.
And Mariah Carey's Dream Lover. Don't forget Dream Lover, which plays a huge role in this book.
Yeah, huge role.
Yeah, 286, the page before, it says same as it ever was, as it ever was, which is exactly repeats in that song. Yeah.
The line that I was looking for is at the very bottom of 287, where both he and the intruders are there. He in the main mansion, they in a house across the road where the forest ends so the sea can begin. Where there once was a house where little boy vanished, a house that burned in the night, which then goes back to invented part. By the goodwill and memory and patronage of Penelope, his lost and missing sister now turned to ashes in the wind. This is of references too.
Yeah. So he isn't in Penelope's house anymore. He has his own house, but it's basically Penelope's house because he's built it with the money he made from her estate. Because she burned her house down. And one thing I was going to point out that I'm not sure you guys really mentioned or focused on in your last episode for the end of the last section was that Penelope dies. Did you guys get that in the fire?
Oh.
She dies.
Okay.
The monastery burns.
Yeah.
And it's unclear at that point if she started the fire or who started the fire, which I'll just leave that as a hanging thing for people to think about because it's another plot point that emerges later. Perfect. Maybe not until the remembered part. I can't remember if it comes out in this.
I think it's in the next one.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Penelope writing her love letter from inside the burning building. That is this building.
Yeah. 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 She dies. As much as anybody dies in this universe. Yeah.
Perfect. That's what we need. That's what we need.
It makes the end of that section even sadder because it's already really sad. That whole that end there.
Yeah. It really is. So then the last part is that arch nemesis bit where they had whatever Nicolásito Pertusato, who was his rival in writing, which I never had anything like that. Like writing, I guess there were writing contests. I think I won one when I was like a kid, like in 5th grade, but it was through like the library, not in school. And like the prize was that they bound your short story. It's like in like silly.
Yeah. I went to Waldorf school. We didn't even have grades.
Just play choices.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. I don't know. Is there anything else you should add about that story? So they're basically playing outside. They're doing construction on the widest avenue in the world, and everyone goes and plays in like kind of the ruins that are there, or like the sort of rubble, and this hole, and then so Pertusato Nicolásito shakes the hand, which is nothing but a high voltage cable that one of the workers forgot to disconnect. And what all of them see then is something that the best special effects in movies still haven't achieved. Yeah. Pertusato Nicolásito's hair begins to smoke and his eyes pop out and sparks shoot from those holes. Pertusato Nicolásito, which is always in full and in like the last and first name version, seems to have immersed them or entered one of those animated drawings where everyone dies so they can be resuscitated and die again. And that horrible smell that'll keep them from eating baked chicken for months without being nauseated or running to the bathroom.
This is why I was going to say that it's okay for you to say that this section is funny because it is funny. Or that it's funny that he dies. You know?
Yeah, it's funny the writing around his death.
But he dies in the invented part as well, right? This is all referenced in the invented part, I believe. Or was it new to you guys? I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I don't. If it is, I don't remember. But like
because the teacher of the artistic activities or whatever, she is in the invented. Is she? Maybe not. Maybe I'm getting it all confused now.
Because there's a lot more about her in here later on.
Yeah.
I don't remember her in there.
No, maybe it's not. Maybe none of that is in the invented part at all. I'm sorry. I'm making it
close together a lot.
Yeah,
so that's quite okay. So that's that. And this is the part where the last page of this section 307 is the part that you referenced, Brian. And over the years, they'll ask you over and over again that question of, as a writer, where do you get your ideas? And wearing that parentheses space, the writer who will always be that boy will wonder why it is that they never ask him something far more important, or at least more interesting, than as a writer, where do you get your ideas? Why do they never ask what made you want to be a writer?
Yep. Which all of this is in the invented part. Yeah. Like it's the same, written almost the same. What's funny is like there's a few like the whole going back to the last section that you guys covered. The whole like speech of mama grandma to Penelope, that is almost exactly the same as it is in the invented part. But there's some changes which I had to I couldn't just like copy and paste. I had to there were some changes and some additions to it, so it wasn't exactly the same. But I'm
trying to remember. I think when he was in Rochester and you were in Rochester, I went to one of his readings, and the first question, when there was time for questions, I like shot my hand up and just asked, "Where do you get your ideas from?" Was the first. Like I had to ask that question and see if we'd actually answer it or not.
Yeah. That's perfect. So I don't know.
So anyway, if you go to any Rodrigo reading, please ask that question. The very first one. Be the first one to ask a question. And just open it. Where do you get your ideas from?
He loves it.
Really sincere and plucky when you ask it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do it. All right. Do you guys have a favorite line from this section?
I didn't read it.
You wrote it.
Fair enough.
Who's a favorite
He
line?
wrote it. It's his book.
Let me see
This
if I can
section
find
was
it.
like super bizarre
Yours is?
because it. No. This section was really bizarre for me because it lined up in a lot of different. A lot of the references in here like lined up in just strange ways for me. Like when they were talking about like this is what art is these days in like 291. That was a performance artist, Marina Abramovich, I think her name was. And one of the stories in my collection was like where do your ideas come from? One of it came from people lining up to want to sit in front of Marina Abramovich. And that's where the story Joytime Killbox partially comes from, was this idea of, so I was like really weird to see that in here, like, oh shit. Or later at the end when he references a quote from like E.L. Doctorow, and I actually heard him say this line when I went to a reading of his in grad school. Just thinking like, oh God, can you imagine getting to the age where you just quote stuff you wrote a long time ago in interviews, and that's what you do when you give talks now? Like it was just really weird. Like there's a lot of just strange stuff in here.
That performance art is great. Fucking performance artists, he thinks, considering performance art the most convenient and easiest art form, especially now that everyone's life has been uploaded to the lowest of all places online, and everyone's convinced anyone can be an artist. And actually looking was part of being looked at. Wasn't she in the news the other day because she's getting attacked for, or they put up a video of her doing something with like some new VR thing, and it got trolled by people who believe that she's a Satanist because of and that she's connected to Pizzagate.
I didn't see anything about that.
I don't know.
I believe you.
I only brought any of that up to buy Will some time to find something because I'm a professional, Chad. See, I try to help people out and fill in the dead space with something maybe slightly interesting.
Yeah, she's
Will, you...
I don't have anything interesting. No, sorry, Brian. I didn't find a favorite line, but I was going to comment on some aspects of this that I find of Freson's sort of like taking on the sort of internet obsessed, phone obsessed culture, like sort of like presaging our social distancing that we're dealing with now, like how we were already social distancing, which I was thinking about the other day and found kind of interesting, like that we have prepared ourselves for social distancing with, you know, our sort of obsession with online life. And he's like, you know, very much attuned to that and seeing that as really damaging in some ways to culture, to literature or whatever. But I don't know. That just occurred to me right now. So
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, think of
interesting, but
think of how frustrating it would be to like if you owned a bunch of guns and then there's no people around to like even tempt you to shoot at them. Like,
right.
What are you gonna do? Just polish them?
Yeah. What's going on here?
Oh my God, an unused gun is just a stick. My favorite line is "Writers were fragile machines."
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I underlined that one too. I'm gonna do the E.L. Doctorow quote on 301 because I loved E.L. Doctorow's idea of what writing a novel was like, and then the narrator's idea. So mine's at about 2/3 of the way down on 301. Writing a novel is like driving a car at night. You can see only as far as your headlights, but you can make it the whole trip, but you can make the whole trip that way. He never learned to drive, and so for him, writing a novel was like crossing a street without being entirely certain the stoplights were in your favor, your shoelaces were snugly tied, or the puddle in front of you wasn't really a pothole several meters deep. It's just like, what is it like to read Rodrigo's right there? It's a treacherous trip across the street. It's going to take a while.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I marked that same line because I was going to ask you if you ever use that advice for your writing classes.
No, I'm sure I've used all of them. I don't have a single original thought in my head, so just spit out. Yeah, it's a fire inside of a house with headlights. So you'll figure it out. See you next week, guys. Like, yeah, that's workshop for you.
I think I'm going to opt out of the favorite line because I arrived unprepared. But I think you guys should have me come back on again because I was thinking, listening to some of the podcasts, that we could do a corrections and omissions episode, a la what's the name of that podcast you and I both like, Jed?
How Did This Get Made?
How Did This Get Made? Yeah.
I would like that because there is so much stuff in here, and it's hard to balance everything and like.
Yeah, it's not like I'm thinking you guys were getting a lot of things wrong, but I just think if I thought about certain things that have been mentioned and like at the end of the season came back, we could like clarify things. But I don't know how useful that is to you guys or to listeners, but
very
interesting. Yeah.
Very. Especially, yeah.
Well, there's that section about reading and rereading. Like, this is my first read of it, so I'm not gonna catch or know anything. You have to be the second or third reading to really have a.
Yeah, and
so none of these opinions matter.
It's so interesting thinking about the fact that these books, they're written at least initially, sort of for a Spanish language audience. I mean, they're written in Spanish, but like he knows they're going to be translated. But like the Spanish language readers have been exposed to all his other books, and there is so much you would pick up on in these books. Like I, having read all of his books, there are so many references and little things that refer back to previous works that aren't in the triptych novel and aren't in The Bottom of the Sky. That are all like his entire body of work is subsumed in this triptych novel. And so like people who don't know the rest of that his body of work, it's like there's a richness there that you're not picking up on.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, but hopefully, I think people who like reading Fresson really like reading him. So like as more of his books come into English, I think that like it'll just make these ones that are already out even richer,
Yeah.
Because there's so much self-reference and so much, the referential mania goes outward, but it also goes, inward. So.
Right. That totally makes sense. And yeah, without like all those earlier books, I mean, we have Kensington Gardens and.
Oh, right. Yeah. That too.
Like that's still, there's a bunch of stuff that hasn't been out yet.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, thank you for joining us from Tampa. Stay safe.
Yeah, you guys too. Thanks for doing this podcast and covering this book. And I know there are a lot of books you could choose to do, and doing 2 of his already in your.
Oh, we're gonna do the third one as soon as you can. We all over that. That's gonna be amazing.
Yeah.
Keep up the good work.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys, and let's talk soon.
Absolutely, man.
Stop cutting your jean shorts and start translating, you Floridian.